The billionaire CEO couldn't eat anything until a little girl fed him and changed his life. She's just a 6-year-old. But when he tasted her fried rice, he said it was the first time he'd felt alive in years. She called him daddy. And when he found the jade pendant around her neck, his world shattered, because it matched the one he'd been carrying for 7 years. Ever since the woman he loved disappeared, pregnant and alone. You think money means anything when your child looks at you like a stranger? The billionaire CEO of a global restaurant empire stood in the middle of a food truck line, wearing a $5 suit, watching a little girl flip rice in a wok twice her size. He had no appetite for anything until now. And he didn't know why the sight of her made his chest hurt. Not yet. Not until it was too late to run. She was just trying to feed her daughter. Every morning, Surin wheeled her tiny food cart down the same cracked sidewalk on 7th and Madison, in a part of Houston where billionaires didn't go. Where people paid in coins, not credit cards. Her daughter, Fuba, stood on a stool beside her, too small to see over the cart without it. 6 years old, tiny hands flipping eggs like she'd done it in a past life. Customers didn't come for the branding. They came because one bite of Fuba's egg fried rice made them feel something they didn't know they'd lost. Hope. Home. But Surin? She was tired. Tired of trying to explain to her daughter why her father never showed up. Mommy, why do the daddies come for other kids, but not me? And Surin had no answer. Because 7 years ago, on a storm-lit night in Atlanta, her life changed. She had woken up next to a stranger. Her jade pendant gone, and her heart in pieces. The CEO of GU International Dining Group, Gail GU, hadn't tasted food in 3 years. After his wife's betrayal and the collapse of his appetite, he survived on IV drips and bitter pills. The media called it executive burnout. Doctors called it selective anorexia. But he just called it emptiness. Until the day he passed a crowd circling a dingy street cart. No press. No white tablecloths. Just a little girl tossing rice with her whole body. Sweat glistening on her temples. And something in his chest cracked. He tasted one bite. And then, he ate the whole bowl. His body didn't reject it. His heart didn't reject it. And when the girl looked up at him and whispered, "I made it for you, Daddy," the world tipped sideways. He froze. Other customers laughed it off. But she was serious. And when her mother stepped out of the back of the truck, Gail's hands started to shake. He knew that face, even if 7 years had changed her. Surin. He remembered a hotel room, a missing pendant, a woman who disappeared without a word. And then the girl, Fuba, pulled something from around her neck. A jade pendant, the other half of the one he carried in his wallet every day since that night. He dropped the bowl. The ceramic shattered on the pavement. And so did every lie he'd told himself. Could she be? Is this little girl my daughter? Chapter 1. The Taste of Memory. He didn't believe in coincidences. Not in love. Not in life. Not after what it had cost him. Gail GU built his billion-dollar restaurant empire by controlling every detail, temperature, lighting, aroma, even silence. Because food, he said, was memory. And his memories were a locked vault. But that day, in a back alley of Houston, a 6-year-old girl shattered his vault open with a single plate of egg fried rice. He didn't understand it at first. The scent was simple: eggs, rice, scallions, sesame. But the moment he tasted it, something in him moved. It wasn't hunger. It was grief, the kind that had no name. And when he looked into her eyes, wide and dark and too old for 6, she said the word that turned his blood cold. Daddy. He had forgotten how that word sounded. How it could land like thunder in a quiet chest. Gail scoffed at first. People were watching. The press could be anywhere. But then the girl climbed down from the cart, walked straight to him, and pulled a string from under her shirt. A jade pendant, cracked in half, delicately carved, familiar. He couldn't breathe. He reached into his wallet, something he hadn't done in years, and took out his own pendant. The other half. They matched. Perfectly. The kind of perfect that hurts. He didn't say anything right away. He couldn't. He just knelt there on the sidewalk. His $1,000 shoes soaked in spilled broth and rice. His heart banging against his ribs like it wanted out. People stared. Paparazzi snapped. But he saw none of it. Only her. Fuba. She had his nose. Her eyes were Surin's. And when he saw her, Surin emerged from the back of the cart. Holding a metal bowl in trembling hands, he knew. Not guessed. Known. This was the woman who had vanished from his life 7 years ago without a word. The woman whose name he never stopped searching in his mind when the nights got too long and the food lost its taste. The woman who had carried his child. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered under his breath. But she turned away. That night, he sat in his penthouse. Lights off, pendant in hand, Fuba's voice echoing. "Daddy, I made it for you." He hadn't eaten in years. Couldn't stomach more than a sip of broth. But today, he'd eaten 2 full bowls. Not just food, her food. And he hadn't thrown it up. He hadn't even thought about it. There was a knock on the door. It was his assistant. "Sir, we ran a background search. The mother's name is Surin. She matches the woman from the Royal Hotel in Atlanta, 7 years ago." His throat went dry. And the girl, she's 6. 6 years. He'd missed 6 birthdays. 6 first steps. 6 times she probably asked where her daddy was. What do you say when you've been missing for someone's entire life? How do you make up for that? He pressed the pendant to his chest and whispered to no one. "I don't care what it costs. I'll make it right. I swear, I'll make it right." How do you love a child who doesn't even know what you took from them? Chapter 2. A Mother's Silence. The next morning, the sun barely touched the horizon when Surin started packing up her cart. She didn't speak, not even to Fuba, who usually filled the dawn with giggles and song. Today, the little girl just stood by the side, holding her spatula like a soldier waiting for orders. Because she'd seen her mommy cry last night. Quiet tears, wiped away with the same dish towel she used to clean the wok. Fuba didn't ask. She just whispered, "Is it because of daddy?" Surin flinched like the word burned her. "He's not your daddy, baby," she said. "He's just a stranger with a familiar face." But her voice broke halfway through. Because deep down, she remembered everything. The hotel room, the confusion, the pendant, the face she tried to forget. She'd been drugged that night. Tricked. And when she woke up, alone and scared, she fled. Pregnant. No family. No money. Just a jade pendant and a decision. To raise her baby, without hate. The street was unusually quiet when they opened. No shouting. No lines. Surin should have felt relief. Instead, she felt watched. And she was right. A black car parked across the street. Tinted windows. And behind the glass, him. Gale. Watching them like they were a memory he'd lost and just found again. He didn't get out. Not yet. But he sent someone. A tall woman in a suit. Hair pulled back. Eyes sharp. "Mr. Gu would like to buy your cart," she said. "And offer you a full restaurant in your name. Rent-free. Fully staffed." Surin didn't blink. "Why?" she asked. The woman paused. "Because he believes the chef's name is Fuba. And because Mr. Gu believes she might be his daughter." The world tilted. Fuba was stirring rice beside her. Humming. Innocent. Happy. Surin lowered her head. "Tell Mr. Gu, this cart is not for sale. And neither is my daughter." That night, after they closed, Surin walked out to the back alley and stared up at the sky. The stars were hidden behind clouds. The wind smelled like oil and sorrow. She remembered holding Fuba in her arms the first time, alone in a women's shelter in Mississippi. No nurses. No family. Just her and a baby who looked at her like she was the whole world. And now, that baby was calling another man, Daddy. She knew Gale wasn't just a man. He was power. He could take everything, not just her daughter, her worth. But she didn't know that inside that black car, Gale had just received the paternity test. And his hands were shaking. "She's mine," he whispered. "She's my daughter." But before joy could settle, guilt crushed him. 6 years. He hadn't been there. Not for her fevers. Not for her first day of school. Not for the nights she asked why other kids had daddies. He thought money could fix anything. But this? This needed something more terrifying. Love. Can you forgive someone who left without knowing they had something to stay for? Chapter 3. The girl who cooked for his heart. She showed up at his office the next morning. Not Surin. Fuba. Gale had just ended a conference call when the elevator doors opened. And the receptionist gasped. There she was. 6 years old, holding a pink lunchbox. Eyes wide, confidence bigger than the skyscraper. "I brought you something," she said. Mommy says food heals people. So I made you the same fried rice, but this time with an extra egg, because you looked sad yesterday. Gail stared at her, stunned. This was the headquarters of GU International, where chefs wore white coats and investors wore navy suits. But the room fell silent, because in that moment, the most powerful man in the building was kneeling on the floor, taking a bite from a little girl's plastic spoon. And when the taste hit his tongue, he closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he smiled. It's better than yesterday, he said quietly. Fuba beamed. That's because I made it with you in mind. She sat in his leather chair, her legs dangling, told him about how she'd learned to fry eggs at age 4. How her mom never let her skip breakfast, even when they couldn't afford dinner. How she always added one secret ingredient. Hope, she said, matter of fact. Mommy says when we cook with hope, people can taste it. He laughed softly, then looked away. Because something about the way she sat there, fearless and full of love, made his chest ache, not with guilt, with longing. Later that afternoon, his assistant leaned in, whispering, "Sir, the board is asking if you're okay." He nodded. "I'm not okay, but I'm better than I've been in years." And then he did something no one expected. He walked into the kitchen on the 53rd floor, home to GU Corp's culinary elite, and made an announcement. Starting tomorrow, this company will sponsor a new culinary mentorship program, named after a girl called Fuba. Because sometimes, the smallest chefs cook the biggest truths. The staff clapped politely. But Gail wasn't performing. He meant every word. That night, as he drove to the food cart again, without security, without pretense, he saw her waiting. Surin, arms crossed, eyes tired. But she wasn't angry. She was scared. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He looked down, then handed her the DNA report. Her hands trembled as she read it. She didn't speak. He didn't push. "I don't want to take her away," he said. "I just want to know her. To earn something I already lost." Surin's voice was barely a whisper. "She's not a trophy. She's not a healing project. She's a child who already survived more than you know." And then, for the first time, her walls cracked. She cried, not because she was weak, because for once, someone else was willing to carry part of the weight. That night, Fuba drew a picture in her notebook. 3 people, a man, a woman, and a little girl. And beneath it, she wrote in crooked letters, "My first family. Is love something you remember, or something you build? One bite at a time?" Chapter 4. The dinner that changed everything. The invitation came tucked inside a pink envelope, hand-drawn with crayon flowers. Fuba had insisted, not just asked, insisted, that Gail Gu come over for dinner. Not to a restaurant, not to his skyscraper office, but to a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the southeast side of Houston, where the walls were chipped and the front door stuck in the winter. Surin hadn't agreed at first. "He's not used to places like this," she said softly, folding laundry with one hand and brushing Fuba's curls with the other. But Fuba had looked at her with that familiar mix of innocence and steel. Then maybe he should be. So that's how it happened. At exactly 6:07 p.m. on a Wednesday, the billionaire CEO stepped into the warm, worn apartment of a woman who had once loved him and a daughter who was his, by blood, by fate, and by the ache that grew in his chest every time he looked at her. The apartment smelled like garlic and ginger. A soft radio played in the background, old country songs that cracked with static but carried soul. Fuba pulled him by the hand straight into the kitchen. "You have to try the soup first," she said, climbing onto a stool to stir the pot. "I made it for your heart." Gail looked at Surin, confused. Surin half smiled. "She means cholesterol," she whispered. "She's been reading health blogs." Dinner was simple. Boiled chicken, jasmine rice, sautéed greens. The kind of food nobody Instagrammed. The kind of food that healed you. But to Gail, it was overwhelming. He hadn't sat at a dinner table like this in decades. No cameras, no catered plating, just mismatched chairs, a chipped glass, and 2 people who looked at him like he mattered more than his money. He forgot how to breathe. Fuba said grace before they ate. She squeezed her eyes shut and held both their hands. "Thank you, God, for bringing my daddy back, even if mommy doesn't trust him yet. But I do. Please help his heart get soft again." Gail's eyes stayed open. He couldn't look away from her. After dinner, While Surin washed dishes, Fuba brought out a worn photo album. "Want to see my life?" she asked. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. She flipped through baby pictures. Birthdays, missing teeth, school plays. In every photo, Surin stood behind her. Alone, smiling, tired. One page had a picture drawn in crayon. A stick figure girl, next to a house. And a cloud labeled, "Dad," floating far above. That was before. Fuba said, "I used to think my dad was in heaven. Mommy didn't tell me the truth until last year." "And what truth is that?" Gail asked gently. She looked at him without blinking. "That you were real. And maybe you didn't know about me. So I decided to forgive you. Just in case." He blinked hard. "Why?" he whispered. "Because holding anger makes food taste bad." She said it like it was a fact. Like she'd known it forever. When Surin joined them in the living room, Fuba had already fallen asleep against Gail's side. Tiny hand curled in his. Surin stood frozen in the doorway for a moment. Then sat across from him, arms folded over her knees. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was heavy, like rain waiting to fall. "You're good with her," she said finally. He nodded. "I didn't expect that from you." He looked up, met her eyes. "Neither did I," he said honestly. "So what happens now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "You can't just visit once a week and think that fixes this." "I don't want to fix it," he said. "I want to rebuild it. With both of you." Surin laughed, softly, bitterly. "You think it's that simple?" He shook his head. "No, but I'm willing to find out how hard it's going to be." They didn't speak again that night. But as he left, he turned back at the door. "I missed 6 years of her life. Surin, I don't want to miss a single day more." Surin said nothing, just closed the door gently behind him. The next morning, Gail canceled 3 board meetings. He drove straight to the city's oldest real estate block, walked into the permitting office, and filed for a new culinary school, named after Fuba. But that wasn't the big gesture. The big one came when he bought a storefront across the street from Surin's apartment. A small, bright space with an open kitchen and large front windows. He had it renovated in 10 days. And on the 11th morning, he placed a sign in the window. "Fuba's table, where every dish has a story." He brought Surin there quietly. She stared at the sign for a long time. Her eyes were unreadable. "This is for her?" she asked. "Yes, but also for you. For both of you. I don't want charity," she whispered. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a beginning. And if it fails, then we try again. Together." They opened the doors 2 weeks later. On the first day, there was no crowd. Just a curious old man, a teenage couple, and a nurse on her lunch break. But they all left crying. Because Fuba had cooked for them. And somehow, her food tasted like memory. Like home. Like hope. By the end of the week, the line stretched around the block. That Friday night, Gail sat in the back booth, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, chopping scallions beside Surin. "I don't remember the last time I did this," he said. "Chopped vegetables?" "No," he smiled. "Worked for something real." Surin didn't respond, but her hands paused for just a moment. And then she reached over and brushed a grain of rice from his shoulder. "You missed a spot, chef." They both laughed, softly, quietly, the way people do when something is starting again, slowly, tenderly. Later that night, after they closed, Fuba curled up in Gail's lap as they sat beneath the glowing sign. She looked up sleepily and asked, "Daddy, will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes, baby. Every tomorrow I've got." She smiled and drifted off. Surin watched from the doorway. She didn't say anything, but in that moment, a weight lifted. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. Some stories start with heartbreak. Some start with a missing piece. But this one started with a bowl of fried rice. And a little girl who reminded a broken man what it means to feel full again. Can you rebuild something you never knew you lost? With someone you never thought you'd find again? Chapter 5. A table set for envy. Every story that tastes too sweet always hides a bitter layer underneath. It began with whispers, then blogs, then headlines. Street chef child linked to billionaire CEO. Goo Corporation favoritism? Culinary starlet sparks controversy. Fuba had only just learned to tie her shoes right. And now she was on the cover of 3 food magazines. Not for her recipes, not for her talent, But for her father, Gail stood at the glass window of Fuba's table, staring out as reporters circled like sharks. Inside, everything still smelled like warmth, basil and browned garlic and laughter. But outside, the storm had begun. Surin was the first to feel it. "They think you gave us this," she said that night, flipping off the TV. "Not because we earned it, but because you're you." Gail said nothing, because he knew it was partly true. He had used his name to protect them, to open doors, to fight back against the silence that kept mothers like Surin invisible, and daughters like Fuba small. But he hadn't expected the war that followed. First came the letters. "Your success is a fraud. Using a child to promote a brand? Disgusting. She's not a chef, she's a puppet." Then came the threats. Fuba's school got 3 anonymous calls. One letter said, "We'll see how her little hands cook when they're broken." Gail nearly tore the city apart. He doubled security, pulled Fuba out of school, held press conferences, but none of it stopped the truth. People hated what they couldn't control. And love, especially love that crossed class, wealth, and gender, was the ultimate threat. Surin blamed herself. "I told you," she whispered. "I knew this wouldn't stay quiet. This isn't your fault." Gail told her. "It's mine. I should have protected you better." "No," she said. "You should have never left me at all." The silence between them grew sharp after that. 2 weeks later, an unexpected letter arrived. An invitation. The American Culinary King Clash. A nationally broadcast competition featuring the top 20 chefs in the country. Somehow, Fuba had been nominated. Surin stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. "This is a trap. Or it's a chance," Gail said softly. "They'll eat her alive." "Gail, she's 6. She's a child. She's more than that," he said. "She's you. She's me. She's what happens when love keeps cooking even when the world tries to turn off the flame." They asked Fuba that night what she wanted. She looked up from her notebook, where she was scribbling her next recipe. "Do I get to cook?" They nodded. She grinned. "Then I'm in." Just like that. Like it wasn't the biggest moment of her life. Because for her, it wasn't about the trophy. It was about sharing something that made people cry in the best way. The competition prep began. TV cameras, marketing crews, competitor profiles rolling on every channel. Fuba was the only child. The only girl under 20. Her competitors were Michelin-starred chefs, world champions, television veterans. One interviewer leaned into the mic and asked, "So, little one, you think fried rice can win against a soufflé?" Fuba looked up, unfazed. "I don't cook to win. I cook so people remember what love tastes like." The room went silent. Someone clapped. It wasn't scripted, but not everyone was charmed. Among the competitors stood a man with perfect hair, a dazzling smile, and empty eyes. Elliot Crane, 3-time winner, media darling, knife skills like lightning, and something darker. He'd once dated Surin, long before Gail, long before she'd vanished with a pendant and a heartbeat growing inside her. When he saw her on the studio set, holding her daughter's hand, he smirked. "So this is her," he said. "You always said I didn't listen. Maybe I should have cooked more." Surin stepped in front of Fuba like a shield. "Stay away from us. You already chose the rich boy. Don't worry, I'm not here for you." He glanced down at the girl. "But I do have a reputation to defend." And just like that, the war began. Gail found out 2 days later. He confronted Elliot backstage. "She's a child," he said coldly. "She's a headline," Elliot replied. "And headlines are fair game. If you lay a hand." "Relax. Goo. I don't need to touch her to destroy her. The world will do that for me." Surin nearly pulled out of the competition that night. But Fuba stopped her. "Mommy, this is the only way they'll stop calling me fake." She lifted her chin. "Let me show them." Surin saw something in her eyes that night. Not innocence. Not bravery. Fire. The same fire she once saw in Gail. And the same fire she'd fought to keep alive all these years, through rent bills, colds, breakups, and quiet nights holding a baby and praying someone would love her again. The night before the competition, they cooked together in silence. 3 generations of pain, 1 table, 1 walk, and as the rice sizzled, and the eggs folded in, Surin whispered, "Whatever happens, you are already more than enough." Climax. The night before battle. That night, Gail sat outside the apartment building. The stars above looked like grains of salt spilled across a dark tablecloth. He clutched his phone. The DNA report. The pendant. The past. He typed a message. Surin, I need to say this. Even if you never forgive me, I will never stop choosing you. And her. But he didn't send it. He just looked up at their window and smiled when he saw a tiny silhouette doing cartwheels. Some wars are fought with knives. Some with cameras. Some with memories. But the most important ones are fought in kitchens, with the people you love standing quietly beside you. And one recipe at a time, you reclaim everything they tried to steal. What if the only way to defend your worth is to let the world watch you rise? Chapter 6. Fire in her hands. The lights above the stage were blinding. Each bulb a sun, each camera a silent hunter. And in the middle of it all, stood a little girl in a hand-sewn apron. Feet barely touching the floor. Heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped drum. 6 years old. Against the greatest chefs in America. Contestant 19. Name? Fuba, she whispered. Full name? Just Fuba, she said again. That's all I need. The judges laughed, not kindly. But she didn't flinch. Because someone once told her, if they laugh at your name, let them choke on your legacy. The rules were simple. 2 rounds. 1 dish each. No assistants. No repeats. Fuba stood in front of her station. Ingredients lined up like soldiers. She'd practiced for weeks. Rice, egg, scallions, sesame, her soul. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. Not today. Today, she had to become something more than a girl with a wok. She had to become her mother's strength. And her father's redemption. The first round began. Chefs chopped, stirred, pan-seared with elegance. A man from Chicago flambéed steak with aged whiskey. A woman from Charleston folded truffle mousse into duck liver. And beside them, the girl in pigtails cracked eggs into rice. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She cooked the way she'd always cooked. Like she was feeding someone she loved. But behind the curtain, Elliot Crane watched, arms folded, eyes narrowed. And beside him, a man in a cheap suit handed over an envelope. We've laced her oil with bitter agent. Just a little, won't harm. But her dish will taste like ash. Elliot didn't blink. Perfect. Let's see her charm her way out of this. The clock struck 0. Judges moved from station to station, tasting, whispering, frowning. Then they reached her. She served quietly. Bowl after bowl. They ate, chewed, paused, then stared. This is remarkable, one whispered. But something's off. Bitterness? Another asked. Yes, underneath the flavor, like char. But it doesn't ruin it. It complicates it. Fuba's hands trembled behind her back. She'd tasted it, too. Knew something was wrong. But she didn't cry. She didn't accuse. Instead, she bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for your feedback." And walked away. Backstage, Surin was waiting. She saw it on her daughter's face instantly. What happened? Something tasted wrong, Fuba said softly. But I still cooked with love. That's all I could do. Gale clenched his fists. He already suspected sabotage. But Fuba didn't want protection. She wanted permission to fight for herself. When the first round results came, tension thickened the air. One by one, names were called. 10 advanced. Fuba's wasn't one of them. Intel. Wildcard selection. Contestant 19. Fuba. Gasps. Some boos. Mostly silence. The head judge, a silver-haired woman with stern eyes, stood and addressed the crowd. Because sometimes, heart outweighs technique. This child served us not perfection, but soul. And that matters. Fuba looked up at her mother in the wings. Surin didn't cry. She nodded. Steady. Strong. You belong here, her eyes said. But Elliot wasn't done. As the finalists lined up for round 2, he approached Gale backstage. She's brave. I'll give her that. You're pathetic, Gale replied. Still hiding behind kids to prove your worth. Elliot leaned closer. Careful. Goo. What if she loses and finds out you couldn't save her? The second round began. This time, Fuba changed her dish. Not egg-fried rice. She made soup. Tomato noodle broth. The dish her mother once fed her during the worst winter of their lives. No power. No heat. Just one bowl between them. She remembered the steam. The way it smelled like a hug. And that's what she cooked. Not to win, but to remember. One by one, chefs presented. Complex, Elegant. Predictable. Then came hers. She placed the bowl down gently. The judges hesitated. One tasted. Then another. Then silence. It's honest. One whispered. It's not just food. It's a memory. When the scores were announced, people didn't clap. They stood. For a 6-year-old. For a mother watching her daughter rewrite every rule. For a man who finally realized power was nothing without love. Elliot came in second. The cameras caught his smile. But not the cracks in his pride. Gail walked over, held out a hand. You lost, he said quietly. Get used to it. Elliot turned, disappeared into the shadows. And no one followed. That night, they returned to their small apartment. No press, no fanfare. Just 3 bowls of soup. Gail took the first sip. Then looked at Surin. This tastes like home. She didn't speak, just nodded. And for the first time in a long time, they ate. Together. Not out of need, but out of peace. Final reflection. Some battles aren't about who wins. They're about what survives. A daughter's pride. A mother's resilience. A father's redemption. And a kitchen where love never stopped cooking. When the world doubts your worth, do you fight louder or cook softer? Chapter 7. The night he stayed. Some nights don't begin with fireworks. They begin with silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. After the culinary clash, the world lit up with Fuba's name. Little chef with a big heart wins nation's heart. The dish that made judges cry. But inside their tiny apartment, there were no cameras, no headlines. Just dishes in the sink and a little girl asleep on the couch. Her fingers still smelling faintly of garlic and tomato. Surin sat at the kitchen table, staring into a chipped mug of lukewarm tea. Gail stood across from her. Neither spoke for a long time. Because what do you say? When you were once everything to someone, and now you're just a stranger, holding a future that might not want you back? You can go, she said finally. She's asleep. We're fine. Gail didn't move. He looked at Fuba, curled beneath a blanket stitched with pink clouds. One leg dangling off the edge, mouth slightly open in dreams. I don't want to go, he said quietly. I want to be where you are. Surin laughed, but there was no humor in it. You say that like you didn't disappear for 7 years. I didn't know, he replied. You knew enough to walk away. I had your pendant, you had mine. That night, something happened. And instead of finding out what, you vanished. He didn't deny it, didn't argue, because she was right. The truth was uglier than fiction. The night she vanished, he'd been drugged, too. He woke up in a strange room. Her pendant beside him, and no note. His mind, poisoned by boardroom betrayals and power paranoia, had whispered the worst. She used you. So he buried it, buried her, buried the ache, until a little girl stirred the grave. I was scared, Gail said, that I'd been a mistake to you. That I wasn't the man you needed. Surin turned to him, eyes steady, not angry, just tired. You weren't. Then softer. But you could be. Now. That night, he stayed, not in her bed, not even on the couch, but on the floor, by Fuba's feet. Pillow in hand, blanket on tile, and Surin didn't stop him. Because something about that image, a billionaire CEO sleeping beside his daughter's tiny feet, was more intimate than any kiss they'd ever shared. In the middle of the night, a storm rolled in. Fuba stirred. Daddy? Gail sat up. I'm here, baby. Don't leave. He brushed the hair from her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. Morning came soft and golden. Rain had washed the city clean. Gail woke to the smell of toast and hope. In the kitchen, Surin stood barefoot, flipping eggs. She looked at him. No smile, but no walls either. Coffee? He nodded. Cream and sugar? She asked. He paused. Just cream. You remembered. I remembered everything, she said quietly. They ate in silence. Fuba humming as she built her toast tower. Gail watching the way Surin tucked her hair behind her ear. Surin pretending not to notice. Something had shifted. Not fallen. Not shattered. Just shifted. Like 2 tectonic plates finally moving closer. After years of pretending the distance didn't crack the world between them. Later that day, Gail drove them to the new restaurant. Not Fuba's table, that was theirs. This was something else. A bigger space. Downtown. Brick walls. Open windows. He handed Surin the keys. For you, he said. No strains. No headlines. Just a place where your name goes on the door. She stared at the sign. Surin's hearth. A pause. Then her voice. Why? Because you deserve to be known. Not as the mother of a prodigy. Not as the CEO's ex. But as you. She took the keys. Her hands trembled. Then, finally. Okay. And he knew. Forgiveness wasn't spoken. It was shown. That night, they cooked together. Not for critics. Not for cameras. For themselves. Chicken and dumplings. Burnt on the edges. But made with laughter. When they ate, Fuba announced, "This is the best meal ever." Surin smiled. Gail looked at her. She's not wrong. As they cleared the table, Surin stopped him. Her fingers brushed his wrist. "You really stayed," she said. He met her eyes. "I will, as long as you let me." Some love stories don't explode. They simmer, quietly, until one day, you realize you're home again. Is it too late to come home, if someone still sets a place for you at the table? Chapter 8. The Knife Behind the Curtain. It started with a whisper in a wine bar. "You know that little girl? The chef prodigy? Word is, she's not really his." The voice belonged to a blogger, sleek dress. Sharper words. The kind of person who tasted bitterness and called it nuance. Across from her, a tabloid editor raised an eyebrow. "Not his daughter? That's the rumor." "You sure?" "Doesn't matter. I can make it real." The next morning, the internet exploded. Scandal behind the sauce. Is Fuba really the CEO's daughter? DNA report forged? Insiders demand truth. From frying pan to fraud. How far will Goo Corp go to protect an image? Surin read the first article before breakfast. By the second, her hands were shaking. By the third, she was pacing the living room floor, phone in one hand, rage in the other. "They're calling her a lie," she whispered. "They're calling me a liar." Gail took the phone gently, set it on the table, and spoke without flinching. "Then we give them the truth." That afternoon, Gail held a press conference. He didn't bring lawyers. He didn't wear a tie. He brought one thing, the original DNA report. He held it up, steady hands. "This is not a story. It's a life. I missed the first 6 years of my daughter's childhood. I will not miss the chance to protect her now." He didn't raise his voice, but the world heard it louder than any scandal. "Her name is Fuba Goo. She is my child, and anyone who tries to take that from her again will answer to me." But the war didn't end there. Behind the scenes, Elliot Crane, humiliated after losing the competition, was plotting something deeper. He'd lost the stage battle. Now he wanted the soul. His plan was simple. Poison public trust. Force Goo Corp to choose between family and reputation. And if that failed, take Fuba away. Legally. It started with a court petition. Filed anonymously. A claim that Surin was unfit. That Gail's association with her endangered his company. That Fuba needed formal guardianship. The message was clear. You don't belong in their world. When Gail read the papers, he didn't speak for a long time. He just walked to the window, looked out at the city he once ruled with silence, and felt it turn on him with sound. Surin stood beside him. "What do? We fight," he said. "We don't run this time." But fear crept in. Fuba saw it. She wasn't naive. She saw the cameras, the men in suits, the way her mom held her a little tighter at night. And one day, she asked, "Am I going away?" Gail knelt down. "No, not ever. I promise. But you left before," she whispered. "How do I know you won't again?" He looked into her eyes and told the hardest truth he'd ever spoken. "Because the pain of losing you once made me realize what it means to stay." That week, they went to court. Not criminal, just family. But in those fluorescent hallways, everything felt criminal. Lawyers questioned Surin's finances, her parenting, even her mental health. Fuba was made to sit in a hallway while adults debated her future inside a box. But what they didn't know was that she was listening. When it was Gail's turn to speak, the room went still. "This isn't about law," he said. "This is about power, about pride. But family is not a product you can file under a trademark. Family is waking up at 2 a.m. when she has a fever. It's burning dumplings together and laughing about it. It's choosing someone, even when the world tells you not to." He turned to Surin. "I didn't choose her when I should have. But I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never fail again." The judge nodded slowly, then looked at Fuba. "Would you like to say something?" The room tensed. Cameras clicked. Fuba stood on the bench. Her voice clear, steady. They're my mom and dad. They make the world less scary. They make food taste better. They make me. If that's not family, then you don't know what family means. Silence. Then applause. Not from the court, but from the people watching through the glass. The reporters. The guards. The ones who'd seen enough fake to recognize something real. The judge smiled. Petition denied. And just like that, they were still a family. That night, they didn't go out. They didn't post. They ordered takeout. Ate in pajamas. And Fuba made victory pudding with too much sugar and a cherry on top. Gail tasted it and laughed. It's terrible. It's love, she said. Later, after she went to sleep, Surin stood on the balcony. Gail joined her. For once, there was no storm in the distance. Only stars. You could have left again, she said, but you didn't. No, he whispered, because this time, I'm not afraid of who I had to become to stay. She looked at him, really looked, then leaned her head on his shoulder. And in that silence, forgiveness bloomed. Sometimes, love isn't tested by what you build, but what you're willing to lose to protect it. What does it cost to stay, when the whole world tells you to run? Chapter 9. The pendant that found its way home. There are stories passed down in families that don't begin with, once upon a time. They begin with a wound, and are carried, silently, like jade in the pocket of a forgotten coat. For Surin, that jade pendant had once meant shame. A scar she wore around her neck. Proof of a night she didn't choose. And a life she was forced to build with nothing but love and memory. But for Gail, it had become his only compass. He'd clutched it through sleepless boardroom nights. Through champagne-soaked galas where he felt like a ghost. He never knew what he was waiting for. Until a girl with garlic on her fingers handed him a bowl of fried rice. And looked at him like she'd known him forever. On the anniversary of that night, 7 years to the day, Gail asked Surin to go somewhere. Not a restaurant. Not a penthouse. Just home. Not hers. Not his. But their beginning. They returned to Atlanta. The Royal Hotel. Room 607. It had been remodeled twice. New wallpaper. New floors. But when they stepped in, Surin froze. Her hand gripped the doorframe. It's smaller than I remembered, she whispered. Gail stood behind her, silent. You were scared, he said. I was broken. But somehow, this is where our daughter began. She turned to him, and almost ended. They sat on the edge of the bed. No words. Just two people staring at a memory like a painting hung on the wall of the soul. Gail reached into his pocket. Took out the two halves of the jade pendant. One cracked. One chipped. He held them up. Aligned the break. They fit. Perfectly. We were never broken, he said. Just unfinished. Surin's eyes filled with tears. I didn't leave because I hated you, she said. I left because I didn't know if what happened was real. And I couldn't raise a child in something that felt like confusion. But you did raise her, he whispered. And she's the best thing that ever happened to me. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, in 7 years, she let herself believe that maybe she hadn't failed. They spent the rest of the day walking through the park where Surin had cried on a bench, clutching her swollen belly, through the diner where she'd scraped coins together for soup, through the streets that once whispered unwed mother like a curse. But this time, she walked with someone beside her. Someone who didn't flinch when she showed him the dark corners. Someone who'd been broken too. And now, together, they were whole. That night, back in Houston, Fuba waited with a surprise. She'd set the table. 3 bowls. 3 napkins folded into hearts. She'd cooked something new. Lemon-soaked rice with honey-roasted chicken. I made it up, she said proudly. It's sour and sweet, like mommy and daddy. Gail took a bite. Surin did too. They looked at each other and smiled. It's perfect, he said. No, Surin corrected. It's us. Later, Fuba found the pendant halves resting on the table. What's this? Your story, Gail said. She picked them up, turned them over in her hand, held them together. Can I keep them? She asked. Surin nodded. They're yours now. Will I wear it forever? Fuba asked. Only if it reminds you that even broken things can find their way back to each other. That weekend, Fuba stood on a stage again. This time, not to compete, but to teach. She was invited to a youth culinary conference as a speaker. They gave her a microphone. She didn't use it. She just stood there, in a pink apron, and said softly, "The best food doesn't come from fancy kitchens. It comes from people who've lost something and cooked their way back to love." The room fell silent, then erupted. Not applause. Belief. That night, Gail held Surin close on the balcony of her new restaurant. They watched the city glitter below. "I still have fears," she whispered. "Every day." "So do I," he said. "But now I know who I want to be afraid with." She leaned into his chest. "Stay? Forever." Some stories don't need a happy ending. They just need a place to rest, where the people inside them are finally at peace. What if the pieces of your heart were never meant to be thrown away, but returned to you when you're ready to hold them again? Chapter 10. The promise he never got to make. Spring came early that year. It snuck in with the smell of rain-soaked soil and jasmine blooming by the apartment window. Fuba taped pink paper hearts to the fridge, declaring it Family Month. Gail laughed when he saw them. "Isn't every month Family Month now?" he asked. "Not official until I say so," she replied, hands on her hips like a miniature CEO. Business was booming. Fuba's table had a line out the door. Surin's Hearth was ranked one of Houston's top 10 new restaurants. But none of that mattered. Not really. Because on Thursday nights, they still made soup together. On Sunday mornings, they still fought over who got the first pancake. And every night, Surin still turned off the porch light exactly 1 minute before Gail knocked. Just to tease him. But even peace can carry its own storm. That storm came in a letter from Gail's board of directors. An ultimatum: step down, or restructure, because you've made your family your business. Gail sat at the head of a long, polished conference table, the skyline behind him glowing gold. He looked around at men in $1,000 suits, speaking in numbers, margins, metrics, risk mitigation, but none of them had tasted his daughter's soup. None of them had watched Surin fall asleep on a couch after a double shift. Flour on her cheek. So he stood up, calm, clear. "I'm not choosing between profit and people. I'm not choosing between my name and hers. If my last act as CEO is to say this, then let the record show I finally got it right." He laid down his badge. "I resign." They didn't expect him to walk out. But he did. And outside, waiting on the curb, were Surin and Fuba. They didn't ask how it went. They didn't need to. Fuba handed him a note folded in four. "This is your next job." He opened it. Inside was a drawing, a tiny house, a garden, 3 stick figures, and a dog. "I thought we needed a dog," she said, serious. "I'll start tomorrow." He smiled. That weekend, they visited a tiny town north of Austin. Just passing through, but something about it felt like a beginning. Quiet streets, flower boxes on windows, a lake that caught the sky just right. Surin paused outside an old bakery for sale. Fuba pressed her face to the glass. "Mommy, this could be our forever place." Gail stepped up behind them. "Then let's make it that." They bought it. Not with investors. Not with press. Just with heart. They named it, The Warmest Place. A bakery, a garden, and a kitchen where Fuba taught other kids how to fold dumplings with their eyes closed. One morning, just as the sun slipped over the hills, Gail walked Surin to the porch. Fuba was asleep inside, the world still quiet. He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, the jade pendant, both halves fused together into one, set into a silver ring. "I never got to ask you 7 years ago," he said. "I want to ask you now. Not because I'm trying to fix the past, but because you've made the future feel safe." Surin's hands trembled. She didn't say yes. She just pulled him into a kiss so slow, so full, that every broken year melted between them. They married in the garden behind the bakery. Barefoot. No photographers. No fanfare. Just 3 plates. 3 vows. 3 promises whispered between bites of cake and laughter. And when people asked years later, "How did you two make it work?" Surin would smile and say, "We didn't. We let it grow. Every fight, every tear, every dish. It built a home we never knew we needed." One rainy night, years later, Fuba came home from college. She stood in the kitchen, now taller than Surin, stirring soup. "I still make it the same way," she said, "because you were always the one who knew how to feed the broken parts of people." Gail told her. She smiled. "I learned from the best. Both of you. True love isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with diamonds and fireworks. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a second chance. A warm bowl, a tiny kitchen, and someone whispering, "Stay. This time, stay." If you had one more chance to love fully, would you finally choose what you were always afraid to hold? The table we build together. There's something about the way love smells. It's not perfume, not roses, not candlelight. Sometimes, it smells like garlic in butter, like soup on the stove, like the faint scent of warm rice on the fingers of a child who just wanted to feed someone she loved. That's what this story was made of. Not money, not power, not success, but the quiet, everyday ways we show up. Even when we're scared, even when we've failed. Gale was a man who had everything except peace. Until a little girl handed him a bowl of fried rice and called him daddy. Surin was a woman who had nothing except courage. The kind of courage that grows in silence. Folds laundry while crying, and shows up anyway. And Fuba? She wasn't just the child who brought them back together. She was the table. The one they gathered around. The one they built with every scar. Every choice. Every second chance. They didn't fall in love again in a grand hotel. They didn't save each other with flowers or rings. They cooked. They forgave. They stayed. And maybe that's the real love story. Not one of a billionaire and a poor girl. Not Cinderella. But a true love story. One where redemption wasn't begged for, it was offered. Where the past wasn't erased, it was honored. Where the future wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. So if you've ever wondered, am I too broken to be loved? Is it too late to come home? You are not too broken. You are not too late. And somewhere, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but somewhere, someone is setting a place for you. A warm plate, a real conversation, a love that stays through every storm. Sometimes, all it takes is one bowl of rice to remind us what we've been hungry for all along. What if your next great love story isn't someone new, but someone finally ready to stay? If this story touched something in you, the next one goes even deeper. And it's waiting, right at the heart's front door. See you there.